Welcome to the best of Oklahoma gardening. Today I'll give you some tips so you don't buy any magic beans. We further take a look at some ornamental sweet potato varieties, some unique beans and squash from around the world, the red hot poker plant, and a unique hornbeam that you may want to consider adding to your garden this season. Underwriting assistance for our program is provided by the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing.
So if you're looking for an easy, low-maintenance perennial, have two different types of flowers on one plant. Capsaicinoids that gives the pepper its heat. Did you know in 2021, 18 million Americans started gardening, and on average they spent about $500 on garden-related items that year. This is big business. In fact, it led up to about a $48 billion industry nationally. Now, just like you, I am excited every year when we get the catalogs and all the seed catalogs to find out what new plants are available. But also, everybody knows spring is the gardening season. And unfortunately, there can be a lot of gimmicks, especially on the internet. So as you're looking for your seeds, be mindful of this. And one easy way to find out whether it's a gimmick or not is just simply follow up with a more thorough internet search. Search on the internet as to what that plant is and if it is available at multiple vendors. A lot of times you might find that some of these gimmicks are only available at one website, or they're available at like a crafting website, which means that they're probably not a legitimate plant. If it is a true legitimate plant, you'll often find that they are available at multiple vendors, and several of those are often reputable nurseries that have been around for a long time. Recently, I've seen social media posts about a pink sunflower. Now, I'm not going to say that there is no such thing as a pink sunflower, but please look at the picture that they're trying to sell you. If you do a quick internet search for pink sunflower, the first thing that you should do is, again, look for that reputable vendor. Many seed companies like Johnny's and Burpee Gardens have been around for a long time. When you see the pink sunflowers that they are offering, they look a little more realistic and have shades of yellow and maroon. Now, these are real plants, while other companies are presenting pictures of hot pink and even purple sunflowers that are likely photoshopped pictures. Furthermore, if you look at the reviews of many of these questionable sources, there are comments suggesting that the plants do not reflect the color in which the customer was anticipating. Many of these gimmicks offer seeds because seeds are the cheapest material for them to repackage and ship. It takes a long period of time for the customer to find out it's a gimmick, and there's plenty of opportunity for the customer to actually never find out that it's a gimmick because the plant might actually die before it blooms. Another example is a few years ago, I was asked by a gardener about some rose seeds that were said to have a rainbow of vibrant colors on each flower. Roses have been hybridized for centuries and do come in some really amazing colors, but if it looks too good to be true or natural, it probably is. Again, a quick internet search of rainbow roses can bring up some beautiful images of roses, and while again some of these probably are photoshopped, some are likely real images. However, these real images of rainbow roses are flowers that have been dyed. Dyed roses can be purchased as cut flowers and may be seen in the floral industry, but do not expect to grow these in the garden. It's sort of like the blue poinsettias that we see at Christmas time that have been dyed or painted. Now, what can make this whole thing even more tricky is the fact that plant breeding has really advanced. At the same time, heirloom and unique international selections are becoming more available. So we're seeing some more really interesting plants that are truly legitimate plants, such as the cheddar cauliflower, the black beauty tomato, or the glass gem corn. These don't look at all like our traditional white cauliflower, red tomato, or yellow corn. But again, if you search the internet, you will find that there's multiple reputable sources for these seeds. As we begin this gardening season, I want us to all get off on the right foot. Don't let the internet fool you into buying magic beans. Instead, be an informed consumer. This time of year in late summer, I always like to walk around the gardens and kind of look at some annuals that really performed well for us. And one of those annuals that I tend to sometimes overlook are the sweet potato vines, but this is something that always gets a lot of attention. Now, I know sweet potato vines have been on the market for quite some time, and some of you probably know them really well, but there are a lot of cultivars out there. For some of you, you might have seen these out in landscapes, but not really known what they are or much about them. So I want to kind of review some of our sweet potato vines that we have here in our collection that just always get a lot of attention. Now, sweet potato vines, they're actually native to tropical America, and the edible sweet potato vine often has a pink or white morning glory-like flower. Now, the ornamental ones that we have here showcase, they tend to not flower because they're bred really more for the foliage. So notice I did say that the flower looks like a morning glory, and that's because in fact it is in the same morning glory family, which is different than the Irish or the white potato. In fact, the Irish or the white potato is actually more closely related to tomatoes and peppers, being in the Solanaceae family. So your sweet potatoes and your white potatoes, they're in completely different plant families, so they're not really related. But we're going to go over some of the ones that we have here. So this first one is called Blackie, and you can see it has a very deeply lobed leaf to it, and it's just got this really deep, intense purple color to it. And you can see that it gets a little green in some of the lower levels that aren't exposed to as much sun. Now, all of these do like full sun. So next to it here, we have the Ace of Spades. And the big difference between these two, Ace of Spades tends to have a little bit more of a rich purple color to it, but it has that heart-shaped leaf. It kind of reminds me of some of the cultivars that we see in red buds that have that real prominent heart-shaped leaf to it. But you'll notice that the new growth is very distinct with that green color. Now again, this is not it reverting. You might remember from a few segments that we did ago about reversion of cultivars. This is not reverting. That's just the new growth, and that's what it looks like. So you get a nice contrast there. Now, and if you're wondering, what do I pair this with? Because it's very bold, it's impressive, the color that you get. One of the easiest ways to create contrast is by simply putting the contrasting chartreuse color next to it. So next to it here we have this very chartreuse sweet potato vine, and this one is called Marguerite. Again, it has sort of a heart-shaped leaf to it that's not really lobed or anything like that. A very beautiful color, but you can just see how it creates this bold impact. Now behind us here, if you're looking for something that's a little bit more subtle, you might go with this tri-colored sweet potato. And you can see it has a little more of a ruffle look to, a little bit more texture to the leaf. As the branches come out, they have kind of a pink tint to them, especially on those newer leaves. They have more of a softer, almost like a subtle green color to the main part of the leaf, but then the margins of it are kind of edged in white and pink. So it's a nice softer look. It really works well in containers that maybe have a little bit softer color and not so bold. Now, the one thing you'll notice about all four of these is they are in raised containers here. In fact, it is actually an old culvert that we dug up out on the road, and we cut it up into pieces and then placed it on end here. Now you'll notice that all of these have more of a trailing habit or kind of a spreading habit. If you plant them on the ground, they kind of sprawl out, and they work really well to quickly cover the ground for that reason. So you can plant a plant in the ground and it's going to really help suppress some of that weed because it's almost like a living mulch. But if you want something that's actually going to climb up, there are a couple of new cultivars on the market, and we've got some that are growing. So let's go take a look. So here we have Sweet Caroline Upside Black Coffee, and you can see how it's created this impressive wall of color here behind us. And what this actually is several different plants that we've planted along just a wire crisscross trellis that we've created from the eave of our house down to the ground with some eye bolts. And so really it was just this crisscross wire that we created, and we allowed these plants to grow up. And you can see how they sort of kind of twine on themselves, creating these little arms that reach up and then we'll grab hold of more stuff. So it definitely does need some sort of structure to actually climb onto, but it will kind of twist up more so than just trail down. Now you can see that it does sort of have that same very deeply lobed dark purple texture and color to it. And also it has the new growth that is very bright green, again creating a nice contrast here. But a very impressive wall. So no longer does sweet potato have to just be crawling on the ground, but actually you can elevate it and really create an impressive display. Now there is also a Sweet Caroline Upside that's called Key Lime, and that is the chartreuse version of this. Now where we planted it this year, we just planted on a single pole for support, and we sort of tried to tie it on there a little bit and get it to grow. And what we found is that one single pole wasn't enough support for it. It didn't allow it to really twist on there and grab onto it well enough. So we didn't see that it was as successful that way. I don't know whether it was necessarily less vigorous or the actual trellis system that we provided for it. But here we've got it growing on a nice crisscross system that's doing well. And then we also have it growing on some stock panels, and then it's topped out at 8 feet. Again, that's the black coffee that's over on the stock panel. So this one is doing quite well for us. I know a lot of people know about sweet potato vines, but if you haven't looked at some of the newer cultivars, there are some unique ones out there. And again, the nice thing about sweet potato vines is I would say per plant, you are getting your biggest return of color per square foot, because the time you plant it after frost till the time the first frost happens in the fall, you're going to have this color all season long. So it's well worth the investment in one annual plant because of the amount of volume of foliage that you get from that plant. Sweet potato vines, although they are tropical, they're well suited for most Oklahoma soils. And other than the potential of root rot, if you overwater the plant, there's really not much concern. They do love full sun, but you want to make sure that you're providing them with consistent moisture through our hot summer months as well. So regardless of whether you want it to trail down, spread out, or grow up, there is a sweet potato vine out there for you to add into your landscape. Give you an update on the warm season beans that you might remember we planted earlier this season. And here you can see the product of the Japanese wing bean. It of course gets its name because it has this really unique wing to the bean here. And so I will say we didn't get too many of these. We're just now starting to get them. However, they will continue to produce until the first frost. So I'm anxious to see how many more of these we get, but definitely a conversation piece to add to your garden. Now, the next thing that I want to show you is the one next to it, and it's kind of grown over more at the top here. And this is the Chinese red noodle bean. And so you can see how long it is. They'll get about 18 inches long. They're very thin and cylindrical. And so you can just chop those up and add those to a stir fry. But again, another unique vegetable to add into your garden. And the next one we have here, now I misspoke a little bit. We have a Thai soldier long bean, and I originally had heard that it was a bush type bean, and so we planted it here in the middle where it didn't have much trellis. But you know, when you grow new things, you learn things also. And so what we have learned is this definitely is a vining bean, and so it's actually taken off on either side and is growing up. And we're just now starting to get a few of these beans coming on, and you can see it's got that sweet pea flower, but then it also has a little bit more of a mottled effect on the actual bean there. So it's got flecks of red on your green pod as well. But of all the four that we planted, the showstopper is this one right here behind me. It is called the Indian snake bean. Now, I have to say this actually isn't a true bean. It's actually more related to the gourd family. And so you can see here why it got its name, snake bean, however, because it definitely gives you that snake vibe when you're in the garden, especially as it kind of curls towards the bottom there. So if you have a phobia with snakes, maybe don't add this one to the garden, but definitely a conversation piece. Now, earlier in the season, before they actually started producing, of course, we had the flowers. And so they produce a small, probably about a 1-inch diameter, sort of frilly white flower, something you might see on like the birdhouse gourds if you've ever grown those. So again, this is related to the gourd family. And this one is almost ready to harvest here at this point. Again, another plant that you can kind of chop up and add to a saute also. So here you have 4 unique international foods from Japan, China, Thailand, and India. And I've got one more from Italy that I want to show you. So here we have an Italian squash going called Zucchino rampicante, and you can see it's really neat to also trellis it. We've got it on a children's trellis that's a little bit smaller, so they can kind of wander through here as they're hanging down. Now, a lot of times you might think with both the Indian snake bean, which is actually a gourd, and then also this one that you might think you need to hang it or support it with a sling or something like that. These are not supported anyway. They have grown themselves over this trellis and are hanging free. So you do want to kind of be careful because they can break off, but we're not actually supporting them in any way. So it's pretty neat to see these. You can see they get several feet long also. Now this is a mild, tender summer squash, and so it actually is used a lot for gnocchi and also ravioli. If you wanted to stuff those, you could use it that way. But it can be also used as a winter squash as well. So they have a lot of different forms. You can see we've got one here that's we've been able to harvest, and we've got several more coming on. So if you're looking to add a little international flavor into your cuisine and you can't find it at the market, you might try next summer adding it to your garden. I want to introduce you to another drought-tolerant plant called Nephofia, or red hot poker plant. Now, there are several different cultivars, and so you don't always just get the traditional red hot poker look, which starts out with a red flower at the top, and as those flowers continue to mature, they actually fade to orange and then yellow. So you get 3 colors on one plant at the same time, which really adds a unique interest into the garden. You can see here there are other cultivars on the market. So some of them have more just of yellow, or they even have a pinky rosy color, as well as a white and cream one that you can add into your garden also. Now, Kniphofia are great for the garden because they are drought tolerant once they're established. So you can see they've got this kind of grassy-like foliage that's pretty stiff, so you don't have to worry about the wind. Now, these are some shorter ones, but there are some that get up to be about 3 to 4 feet in height. But even those stems are going to be pretty self-supporting, so you don't have to really worry about them needing staking or anything like that. The other thing is you can actually cut these and bring these in as indoor cut flowers as well if you want to. And they're going to continue to bloom for about a week for you. So you get a good long bloom time out of each of those flowers as well. And once they are done blooming, you want to make sure to go ahead and cut out those flowers. Otherwise, they will set seed. And by cutting those out, you're going to encourage it to continue putting up new flower shoots as well. Now, Kniphofia is, again, I mentioned a drought-tolerant plant once it's established. So the biggest problem with it, it really doesn't have any disease or pest issues, but the biggest problem is having root rot or crown rot. So be careful of that. And if you find that you are not getting as many flowers on it, you might want to plant it in a raised bed or something like that. Otherwise, it's hardy from zones 5 to 9, so it might be one you want to consider adding into your garden. Today I want to introduce you to a couple of trees that go by the common name hornbeam. And in fact, there are two that do really well here in Oklahoma and are in fact Oklahoma proven plants. Now the first one is the American hornbeam, which is Carpinus caroliniana. And it's actually a slow growing, shorter tree. So it's only going to get about 20 to 35 feet tall and often has more of a globular form to it. Now behind me we have the European hornbeam, which is known as Carpinus betulus, and in fact it gets a little bit taller, about 40 to 60 feet tall, and you can see it has a bit more of a pyramidal form to it. Does not require any pruning if you don't want to prune it. However, it can actually handle a fair bit of pruning because over in Europe they often will prune these trees down into smaller shrubs and create dense hedges that way. One of the things about the hornbeam that they're most noted for is their bark. You can see if you look at the texture that's on the trunks of the trees, they have kind of this muscly wood, and that's actually another common name for them, is musclewood. You might remember a few years ago when we were on campus looking at columnar trees, there is a cultivar of this European hornbeam that is known as fastigiatus. And that is actually a columnar form, and so it's going to be very tight and narrow and upright, which is a nice addition to add in some of those smaller areas to kind of cover up larger, taller buildings as we have done here on campus. Now, if these three trees still don't fit in your landscape, I've got one more option for you to add hornbeam into your garden. If you've ever visited the Botanic Garden here at OSU, you probably have walked along this main path that cuts through the garden. And on the east side of this path, we often like to plant a lot of different perennials. Now, you might remember that we used to plant a pennisetum called First Night that was a very dark ornamental grass that would get to be about 4 to 5 feet tall and just create a nice division between the pathway and this garden behind us here. Well, about 4 years ago, we got kind of tired of planting that annual every year, and so we looked at another option. And today I want to talk about this other hornbeam that we have here. This is a dwarf columnar hornbeam. So it is a European hornbeam. However, you can see that it is a cultivar that's going to stay relatively small and compact. Unlike the columnar hornbeams that we have seen on campus, this one is going to remain at about a 10-foot height. Now, when we planted these about 4 years ago, they were only about 18 to 24 inches tall. So you can see they've more than quadrupled in that time period since we initially planted them. As most of them are about 6 feet in height now, we do have some variability in the 16 that we have planted here on the east side. Now, these dwarf hornbeams are actually hardy from zones 5 to 8. So here in Oklahoma, we're in that ideal range. They're going to remain about 2 to 3 feet in width. And the nice thing about these is they do not require any pruning at all. In fact, we have not done anything. Because they have this dense, compact habit, however, they actually serve as a nice shelter for birds and other wildlife that might seek some shelter in there. Now you can see they have a really kind of rough, heavily veined leaf, and they're also going to have some yellow fall foliage. So they're very low maintenance, tough plant, and a perfect addition for that small backyard garden in order to sort of kind of create a screen. Now you can see ours are planted about on 5-foot centers, so we're gonna have a little bit of space between them, but they kind of create these column effect as you walk down this walkway here. So regardless of whether you have a lot of room or not much room at all, there's likely a hornbeam that you can add into your landscape.
Us next week on the Best of Oklahoma Gardening as we visit beautiful backyards from around the state. To find out more information about show topics as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure to visit our website at oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. Join in on Facebook and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. Tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater gem. We would like to thank our generous underwriter, the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is also provided by Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, the Oklahoma Horticulture Society, the Tulsa Garden Club, and the Tulsa Garden Center.